Adjustment, Monday, October 25th, 2021. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Zoning Board to be open, adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on December 10th, 2020, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on December 29th, 2020, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on December 29th, 2020, said notice was posted in the office of the zoning board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcasts on Howell Township TV 77. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and the decorum appropriate to judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For any members of the public wishing to ask questions or comment on an application, you will need to use the raise your hand feature when the chairman opens the hearing up for members of the public. Once you're brought into the meeting, you will need to have both audio and video, and you will be sworn in and required to give your name and address. If you are calling in, you can press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself.
Hey, thank you, Eileen. Can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Cantor has been excused. Mr. Hughes?
Here.
Mr. Mertens?
Here.
Mr. Moretti?
Here.
Mr. Roscoe?
Here.
Mr. Saya?
Here.
Mr. Stanton has been excused. Mr. Gonzalez is absent. And Chairman Nansen.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Tropoli, you mind swearing in the professionals, please?
No problem. With the professionals, please, and including Ms. Beam, as best as you can, raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you'll give this evening will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
So tonight we have Ms. Beam, Mr. Cunliffe, and Ms. Spiro, and Mr. Aguiar, all sworn.
Thank you. Approval of minutes,
There are no minutes to approve this evening.
vouchers,
There are no vouchers this evening.
correspondence.
We do have a letter from Salvatore Alfieri about the Brookstone at Casola Farms. They are withdrawing their application.
Okay. That all the correspondence?
Yes, that's it. Sorry.
Okay, resolutions, BA 2116, Allison Panzier Stern. Revocable trust, revocable trust. Resolution granting bulk variance for swimming pool and associated debt. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Orozco, Saya, Stanton, Gonzalez. Do I have a motion?
The chairman, I make a motion to move it.
Okay, got a motion, but
I'll second that. Oh, Mr. Nansen is frozen. Oh, there he goes.
is there a second?
I second that, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Mr. Hughes. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
and Mr. Saya.
Yes.
Resolutions memorialized.
Okay, next resolution, BA 2115, DE Robertson LLC. Resolution granting variance relief to construct a single-family dwelling with septic system on an undersized lot. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Martin, Orozco, Saya, Stanton, Gonzalez. We have a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Mertens. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Roscoe. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
resolutions memorialized.
Thank you. Case number BA 1837, CTC Landscaping, resolution granting a one-year extension of time. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Roscoe, Saya, Stanton, Gonzalez. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Hughes,
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
seconded by Mr. Saya. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
and Mr. Saya,
Yes.
resolutions memorialized.
Hey, thank you. Okay, cases before the board. Okay, case number BA 1709A-2, Fairfield Industrial Park LLC. Application of Fairfield Industrial Park LLC is applicant and owner seeking a use variance approval to permit a new tenant use, NP Social Service Agency, at a specific location within the subject property. The daily operation of new tenant will include providing vocational and, well, my lighting is terrible there. In daily living skills training for adults with development disabilities on premises known as Block 168, Lot 8, 8.02, 912 through 918 Highway 33. This application was heard September 27th when it was carried to October 25th for a vote only. Expiration date January 8th, 2021. Eligible voters, Mertens, Moretti, Sayed, Nansen, and also Mr. Hughes and Mr. Roscoe were both certified. Is that correct, Mr. Tropoli?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. We have 6 members that are eligible to vote. And let's bring in Dante Alfieri, who's in the waiting room.
He's on board.
He's on the call. He's on the board now. Let's see.
Good evening, Chairman,
Yes,
members of the board.
very good. Dante, I don't know if you heard the colloquy between myself and the chair. We have 6 members that are
I
certified.
did hear that.
What is your pleasure?
I feel that we should move to have the vote tonight. I think 6 is more than enough, hopefully.
Okay, very good. Mr. Chair?
Would you like me to sum anything up before we go to the vote?
Mr. Tropoli, I'm gonna leave that in your ballpark.
I'm fine with that. Dante, if you just want to very briefly recount what this application is about so that it refreshes the board's memory, and then we'll proceed with the 6.
Yes, so thank you. So as the board may remember, we were here at the last meeting. There was a short on a quorum for a use variance, but we proceeded with the application itself with where we reserved the right to hold the vote when the board had sufficient members for the vote. We had 3 individuals provide testimony at that meeting. We had Ms. Rector, who provided all of the operational testimony as it relates to the proposed use. We had Scott Kennel come up and provide testimony as it relates to the traffic. And then lastly, we had Mr. Osceola provide planning testimony to support the application itself. Again, it's Everest Community Services, which is essentially I don't want to call it a adult daycare, but that's essentially what it is. And again, the site itself lends itself well to what this proposed use is. So we would like for the board, if it's the board's pleasure, to approve the application.
Matt Gonzalez, who came in.
Thank you, sir.
We also have Mr. Gonzalez in the meeting now.
Okay. He is eligible, correct? Mr. Gonzalez,
Yes.
did you review the testimony on Fairfield Industrial Park?
I saw most of the documents that Eileen had sent over to me for
Okay.
tonight's meeting.
Okay. Okay, so we've got 7 members now, Mr. Tropoli.
Okay,
Okay,
leave it to the board.
hi, Jen. Welcome
Hi,
back.
Jen.
I see you made it.
I made it. I
You
made it.
All
Yes.
right.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I believe the application is clean, forthright, and a benefit to the community. And therefore, based on all the testimony that I've heard, I'd like to make a motion to approve the application.
Thank you, Mr. Saya. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay,
We're ready.
seconded by Mr. Moretti. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
I too, I agree with my colleagues. I feel that the application was very forthright. It's a good match for the building where it's at. I think it's not in a high trafficked area, and I believe it will be a suitable tenant for this site. So my vote is yes.
Application is approved.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the board. I appreciate your time tonight. Have a
Thank
good
you,
evening.
Mr. Alfieri. You too.
Take care.
You too. Okay, next case on the board. Okay, Brookstone has been withdrawn, so that is no longer on our agenda. Case number BA 2109, New Jersey American Water Company, amended preliminary final major site plan with bulk variance. Application, New Jersey American Water Company is applicant and owner seeking amended preliminary and final major site plan with ancillary bulk variances relief as required as condition of the prior use variance approval to demolish the existing residential dwelling, machine shop, warehouse, and associated improvements located in the northern portion of the property and install a 41,500 square foot material storage area with 114 foot by 19 foot storage canopy. Parking area east of the building number 2 will be removed, replaced with paver, patio, and gazebo. The loading area north of the building number 4 will be milled, raised, and repaved to allow direct vehicle access to the building. Additional improvements proposed include fencing, lighting, landscaping, signage, sidewalk, refuge enclosure, EV charging station, and improvements to the existing site, potable water and sewer septic utilities on premises known as Block 177, Lot 69, 149 Yellowbrook Road. Expiration date, January 12th, 2022. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Neil O'Brien. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Archer and Greiner. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, New Jersey American Water Company, who runs a public utility operations center at 149 Yellow Brick Road, Block 177, Lot 69. Property is about 12.7 acres. It's located in a SED zoning district in which public utility facilities are a permitted use. But just a way of a brief clarification for your discussion a couple of minutes ago, we are actually requesting a use variance approval tonight because we are there by virtue of a use variance approval previously granted by the board to allow more than one use or more than one occupant on the site. And also because we have several buildings that comprise this operations center use that many of which are considered principal buildings. So for reasons outlined in both your board planner and board engineers review and in our responses to that review, we are actually, just by way of clarification, asking for a D variance this evening to modify the existing use on site, but which was permitted by use variance approval granted by the board. So just to recap, just very quickly, the history of my client's involvement in this property. Back in 1996, this board approved by resolution 1996-14A, a use variance approval to allow more than one use on the property, and to allow, there was actually a residential use, a security guard building, who obviously was there for site security on the property, and again, multiple buildings. In 2019, for those of you that were here, we actually appeared and asked you to remove a condition of that previous zoning board approval to allow limited 24-hour operation for our utility operations, because our use, as you'll hear, involves the work that utility companies do both on-site and off-site to keep a water utility in operation. And as part of that use, if there's an overnight water main break, obviously the water company can't wait till the next day to go fix it. They've got to come and get a truck and maybe some fill material and maybe an excavator and go out and address that water main break as close as possible to when it happens. So back in 2019, this board granted our request for an amended use variance approval to allow that limited 24-hour operation for the water company to go out and address those emergent conditions. Back in connection with that 2019 application, we also indicated that New Jersey American Water Company would be taking over full occupancy of the site. We'd be occupying all of the buildings that were at that time occupied by the then property owner, Hall Construction, and a couple of other tenants. And we also indicated that there were no site improvements proposed in connection with that 2019 application, but that some site improvements would be imminent to adapt some of the buildings for the public utilities use. So it sounds like there's quite a bit going on with this application, but actually there's just, as you'll hear, some minor modifications around the buildings and to parking, and to give the water company a storage area, a material storage area for some of the materials that it uses both on-site and off-site. Also, and importantly here, the water company predicted that it would occupy all of the building and ultimately have about 100 and I think 85 to 92 employees on site when it achieved full occupancy. With COVID and with people working from home and with people being more slow to return to work from home, and some people not returning at all, staying working at home, we're actually looking to amend that representation that we made in 2019 and allow our only remaining tenant, which is KSI Engineering, to stay on site. Their lease expires in 2023. We had represented to the board that all of the tenants would leave the site when their leases expired, but we're now going to ask for your approval to allow KSI to renew their lease and to stay in just a limited portion of the existing office building on site. They'll continue to occupy the second floor, but we'll get into all this detail and we'll explain all of that for you, hopefully without being too long-winded here. And to that end, I have just a couple of people who I think will testify tonight and would ask that the call host would add them as panelists. The first one is Patrick Westhoven from New Jersey American Water Company. We also have our engineer, Robert Romano, from Owen Little and Associates. And then we have a planner to talk about the bulk variances we're requesting tonight, Clifton Quay from Stantec. So hopefully you can find those people and unmute them so we can run through the testimony that we have for you here. So first, I would ask Mr. Westhoven. Pat, are you there?
Neil, it looks like everyone's there.
Thanks, Ron.
So why don't I swear everyone in at one time? I see Robert is there, but he's muted. If you could show his camera, please. And the three witnesses could unmute.
Unmute.
Yep, there you go.
Okay.
And there you go.
There
Okay.
we go.
All right. If you gentlemen, please raise your right hand. You swear the testimony that you'll give this evening be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Right then, Mr. Westhoven, starting with you, may we have your name for the record, please?
Patrick Westhoven. I'm a senior project engineer for New Jersey American Water and a project manager for this project.
Thank you. Mr. Quay?
Yeah, Clifton Quay with Stantec Consulting Services. I'm both a licensed professional planner and licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. 10,000 Mid-Atlantic Drive, Mount Laurel, New Jersey.
Thank you. And Mr. Romano, please.
Yes, a professional engineer, professional planner, certified municipal engineer with Owen Little and Associates in Beechwood.
Very good. All sworn, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Counselor. So, Mr. Westover, Pat, if we could start with you. I gave just a short description of what the water company does at this facility. Can you just tell the board what goes on out here, what it's used for?
Sure. This will be the operations center for local and regional water and sewer utility services, including administrative offices for New Jersey American personnel, staging, parking, and the total outfit of New Jersey service trucks and other vehicles, storage for utility-related materials. We also have testing repair area for meters, and we have a locker area for service personnel. On a daily basis, New Jersey American utility work vehicles depart the facility between 7 and 7:30 a.m. and return in the afternoon between 3 and 3:30 p.m. Monday through Fridays. Field work could include such things as pipe installation, repair services, connection, and other utility activities. There's no customer service component at this building, and therefore only marginal numbers of external visitors to the facility, including limited deliveries. As approved in 2019, and as Neil said, the Operations Center provided on-call assist or essential service operation, providing overnight responses to emergency work, including, for example, motor vehicle accidents affecting utility infrastructure or other similar events. The overnight response necessary to support restoration of the utility services generally only happens twice per month based on historical experience. And overnight entails on-call crews reporting to the facility and departing in utility vehicles to the location where response is needed.
What's the service area for the facility?
The service area is Howell Township, Lakewood, New Egypt, and the barrier island of Ocean County.
Right. And in 2019, you heard my description that we indicated that the water company would move to full occupancy of this building of the property as tenants departed. So what's happened since 2019?
Since 2019, COVID-19 changed a lot of our workers on site. Many employees have not returned to the workplace. Some will continue to work from home. We have space on the second floor for the office building for KSI. So, you know, basically our employees are now not reporting here as much as we thought they would be, or to really other service areas also.
Sure. And Hall Construction has departed, right?
Correct.
And the former residential home is empty, right?
Correct.
So the idea in 2019 was that New Jersey American Water employees would be coming from other facilities and just sort of gradually phasing into this property in mostly in the office building.
Correct.
And that has happened to a point, but not to the extent that you predicted in 2019.
Yes, we have about 53 office employees and 22 non-office personnel. Non-offices are out in the outbuildings, going to the site or in the meter shop.
Okay, so where we said we'd have between, I think, 185 to 192, we've only actually got in the 70s conservatively.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What are the hours of operation out here?
Right now, meter testing or the office building is from 7 to 6 p.m. With limited weekend activity. Meter testing is from 7 to 8 p.m. Also limited weekend activity on Saturdays. And again, the overnight activities for limited purpose, including, you know, the system monitoring and emergencies.
And that is as we predicted it would be in 2019.
Correct.
Okay. So in terms of KSI staying on the property or even bringing a few more employees in if they need to, we're talking about like space for like space, right? Just yes. It's just an office occupancy.
Correct.
So it's New Jersey American Water employees that would have come to the site who now may or may not come to the site, or not coming to site in the foreseeable future, rather, and it's like space for like space.
That's correct.
Okay, so no extra parking demand, no extra occupancy.
Yes.
Yeah,
A couple other quick things.
Brian, but
Yeah,
I've got a couple of quick questions.
yeah.
Hey, I know, hopefully, gosh, hopefully we'll be out of this COVID crisis soon. But at any point, would those employees return to work on site in the near future? What happens when the water company's employees come back?
So these folks were actually never at the site. They were going to be coming from other facilities. So in 2019, we had significantly fewer employees than even the 76, I think Mr. Westhoven referred to. These were folks that were supposed to be gradually coming to the site from other locations.
Yeah.
And it's the applicant's determination that a lot of them just aren't going to come at this point. Am I correct, Pat?
That's correct. Yes.
But what happens if that changes?
Mr. O'Brien, I think what the chairman is trying to get at is, COVID passes, at some point in the future, things return back to business as usual. Don't hamstring yourself or the applicant with the maximum number of employees that you anticipate being there. All things forgetting COVID, what's the maximum amount of employees you think would be on site?
Pat, that's a question for you more than for me, but
we're pretty much, we have the capability of.
Would it be in accordance with the 2019 testimony regarding the max number of employees? No change to that, even with KSI staying on the site?
No, if KSI moved out of the site, we would have the max number. I think it was 185. But even looking at it now, we only have about 56 spaces on the first floor. So I'm assuming that we would have between 50 to 75 employees on the second floor max.
So Pat, but the total number, including with KSI employees, wouldn't exceed the number we predicted in 2019.
That is correct. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Mr. Chair, I just want to share my screen real quick because I want to reacquaint the board to the site just so you guys are familiar with why we're here and what the application is. So I'm just going to share Google Earth real quick. This is the most current aerial imagery. This is the site, 149 Yellow Brick Road. There's a 2-story office, which they were talking about, which currently has New Jersey American Water and KSI engineers. There's a building in the back here that was approved to just be used for storage of heavy equipment and materials associated with New Jersey American Water. Currently in the back here, it has a backup loading area, like similar to warehouse applications where, the gate of the truck backs right up to the building. Obviously, that doesn't work for the applicant's use with trying to easily maneuver heavy equipment and materials and stuff into that building. They're proposing to make some changes to this layout to make it so it's an at-grade transition to improve the ease of access of their operations. At the bottom left-hand corner here, this was the meter shop where they were approved for testing. If I recall correctly, everything was to occur inside the building. There was a building here that was for general locker room space and things like that. And then another subsequent, spare utility type building for storage of materials. Really, if this application wasn't changing, KSI wasn't being added here, we wouldn't be considering use variance. We'd only be considering site plan. And that was a condition of the 2019 approval. If the board recalls, this property, when it was developed, I think in the early 90s, mid-early 90s, had a lease area for a separate contractor's business along the south side of the property. There was a residential building at the southeast corner that was for overnight security purposes with making sure that, no intruders were coming into the site. At the 2019 hearing, we deferred this site plan approval to future, which is a subsequent of this application, which was to occur when those uses were abandoned at the end of their lease terms. So that would be the residence and then the additional hall, construction, office use in the main building. So if KSI was not part of this, really we'd just be talking about site plan, buffer and things like that. I will just note for the board's perspective, it's KSI, it's an office space use. The building was considered at time of use for 100% office. So it's a 1-for-1 swap. It's just a matter of the site being occupied by one single tenant versus an additional office space tenant.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. O'Brien?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Conlon. That really was extraordinarily helpful. And if there are no more questions for Mr. Westoven, we'll ask our engineer, and you've stolen a little bit of his thunder here, but he's going to talk through the nuts and bolts of what we're proposing out here.
Jen, do you have any questions?
Not yet.
Okay. Any board members have any questions? Okay. Mr. O'Brien?
Thank you so much. And thanks again, Mr. Conliffe. Mr. Romano,
Yes.
you've testified before this board before, have you not?
I haven't testified, but I did a few times sit with the board when Ernst Lissadin was
right.
The board engineer. It was a while back, filling in for Jack Mellon on conflict nights.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So,
do we accept Mr.
in front of a few other boards, though?
Well, I need let's get his credentials on the record just to be safe.
Sure. I'm a registered professional engineer. I've been licensed in New Hampshire and California as well. I've been in practice since 1974, licensed in 78. I've appeared through many boards, Monmouth, Ocean County. I've done site plans, subdivisions, roadway plans. I work for the Parkway. We work for NJDOT. I do NJDOT maintenance sites throughout the state. We were post office engineers for a while. I was employed with Ernst Lissadin for over 30 years. I was a principal in that firm. I'm now not quite semi-retired, but I'm trying to be.
We accept your credentials, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Romano, if you could, looking at our aerial site exhibit A17, if you could just again orient the board to the surrounding uses, and let's work our way in.
Sure. Could I have that up on the screen, or could you give me the screen and I'll do it? Either way.
Can we pull that?
Am I on?
Yeah, you are. Can
okay.
Mr. Romano share his screen?
Eileen?
Hold on one second.
Okay.
Thank you. He'll just be able to use his pointer in much the same way Mr. Conliffe did. And
Mr. Romano, you should be able to do it on your screen on the lower left.
Let me see. Lower left. I see mute. I see stop video. Share screens in the center.
Yep.
In the center, sorry.
That's fine. Now you should see it. Okay. So this is basically a Google aerial, I guess. It came in through AutoCAD, but this shows the site and surrounding uses and the zoning. The site itself is located in the SED zone. The SED zone extends to the north, where there's a few other sites. There's a pallet recycling site. American Water has a tank and I believe it's a water plant, filtration, and a well. There's Girl Scouts has an access drive, and they have I think it's a Jersey Shore building there, and then I guess there's another site to the north. To the south is the ARE2 zone. It's a residential zone, but there's an adjoining farm use. Seems to be mostly construction. There's a lot of materials in there. There's two subdivisions, a cul-de-sac basically to the west, which is a residential cul-de-sac, and another cul-de-sac. This is to the, I guess, to the southwest with residences. And this is the farm use here. Across Yellow Brook Road, there's a farm use. It's also used as a rifle range, I think a skeet shooting range. I think there's gun sales or ammunition sales or something there. There's a residence here. It's a little hard to see on this photo. There's a residence that's located as well, and that zone is that the ML? It's the AR2 zone as well across Yellowbrook. And then to the Southeast is ML8 zone. It's basically wooded area. There are some wetlands located far to the east of the site, and it's largely undeveloped. ML8 zone is I guess medium low income, and it's also R4 zone residential, and there's some neighborhood commercial uses that can go in there as well. And there's the site. Mr. Conliff went through most of that as far as what's going on. I'll quickly go through it again. The office building's remaining, the parking is remaining. Around the office building, I'll get to the site plan, I'll show you the improvements. This is the vehicle storage building. Again, we'll be reconfiguring the drive. This is becoming a storage area, and the meter shop, which is where they test meters. It'll be about eight or 10 employees there. This is a locker, we're going to call the locker ready room, which is basically the field personnel's lockers, bathrooms. There's a lunch counter, lunch building in there. The parking area adjacent will be removed, and it will become a patio with a gazebo for summertime lunch activities. This is an existing chicken coop that was used for storage by a Hall company. That will be removed. This was a wood shop, I believe. That will be removed. And then there's
Mr. Chair, I could just interject.
Yes.
I mean, I don't mean to interrupt your rhythm, but like I think the board is really familiar with the site, so probably let's move on to the site plan.
All right, let's move on to the site plan, please. Then let me grab that. And so we did a little colored rendering of the site plan, just to bring out a little bit more of the highlights. And again, I'll just start quickly and go through what we're planning on improving. There's an existing sidewalk that's kind of a cobbled surface, field stone around the building. We're going to replace that with a heated concrete sidewalk. We're going to
get the site plan.
This is the site plan.
Oh, that is. Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes. Let me blow it up a little bit more. Okay.
Bob, and just to confirm for the board, this was submitted in advance and it's one of the
Yes,
market exhibits?
this was submitted last week.
Okay.
And
thank you.
basically, there's no changes on here. It's a representation of the two layout plans with some of the landscaping plan put on it. So there's nothing different about this. This is really a display map, just as I would call it.
It's listed as A18.
Very good. So we'll be replacing the sidewalk. There's presently handicap parking in this rear area here. The accessible parking, we're going to move to the front of the building at the main entrance. And the parking spaces back here did not really conform slope-wise. So we're going to rebuild a little bit out here and make it more accessible. We're going to take the sidewalk and get it up the current ADA standards.
There we go. Okay, cool.
Okay, we are putting in a little EV station in this area here. I believe that's required with site planning now and for larger sites. So we will have that ability, and that could be expanded in the future if need be. I think Hertz just bought 100,000 Teslas, so I guess it's the way of the future. The vehicle access area where this darker pavement is, that's where the pavement will be replaced. The area will be filled. There'll be some additional, not additional, but newer configured drainage that'll work a little better than what was there. It will connect to the rear drainage. There's a detention basin in the rear. The vehicle storage building, we'll put up the architectural plans. If we have the architect, I can bring them up as well. Basically, what we're doing is we're putting in overhead doors. There'll be a Vector truck storage in there. There'll be pickup trucks, some trailers, basically their operational equipment. Everything will be stored inside the building. There would be no heavy equipment stored outside. The only storage that we would have, our only equipment that we would have would be in the material storage area where there would be a single backhoe, small backhoe loader, and that would actually be stored inside a material storage canopy in the back. So that would be out of sight as well. I'll get to that. This metal shop warehouse, meter shop warehouse, excuse me, is again, will be fitted with the lab equipment, not really lab, but the water equipment necessary. The water is flushed to the rear, to the drainage system. It's not, doesn't go into the sanitary system. And the locker ready room, again, is going to be reconfigured to serve employees. And here's the patio with a fairly good sized gazebo. And that'll provide outdoor seating and a lunch area for the better weather times of the year, for the nice amenity for the employees. The new parts of the site really is material storage area. This is be a paved surface, and there'll be a new material storage canopy. The material storage canopy basically will house stone and maybe some aggregates, some other type of loose materials, sands that they would use in the maintenance operations. Within the material storage area, what will be stored there is items such as the meter pits, the covers, valves, fittings, pipe, and I don't know if basically the materials that would be used to go out on an emergency or go out and maintain the system. So there'll be various pipe sizes, various fitting sizes, and the material needs to be handy and ready, and that's what it'll be in this area. I don't believe there would be like a topsoil area or anything like that. Most of any kind of materials that would possibly wash would be within material storage canopy. This area will drain to a new bioretention basin. This is designed in accordance with the updated best management practices. Bioretention basin would overflow to an infiltration basin. And as far as, I guess I can just touch on stormwater quickly. By reconfiguring this area, we're actually reducing impervious coverage of the site that drains to the rear detention basin, and therefore reducing the flows to the basin. So we'll have an improvement in that rear drainage. It's somewhat slight. It's only a few percent perhaps of a reduction. And all the new drainage that comes in here will go to the bioretention filtration basin, and we will be reducing flows from the site onto Yellowbrook Road. And approximately about this area here, there's a culvert crossing. There's an inlet and a culvert that goes across and drains towards the wetlands. I can't remember the name. I guess it's a Yellowbrook over in that area. I think the Yellowbrook's on the side. Anyhow, the Yellowbrook, and so we were reducing flows in all respects. We've gone over with the engineer, and I think we're good as to what we were doing. Let me just.
Yeah, Bob, in terms of the material storage area, we've got at least a portion of it in the front yard, right?
No, there's no material storage building is
the area.
The front yard is 100-foot setback. The building number one is basically at the limit of that 100 feet, and we're lining up. I can zoom in here even farther.
But the material storage area itself, the new material storage area, we're asking for a variance because it's located partially within the front yard, although it's screened.
That was flagged in the original engineer's review, and we've discussed that. And Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically the setback, which you can barely see right in this area, the building is 101 feet. The required setback is on this line here. No, this is the buffer line 50. I think it's a 100-foot setback. So the material storage is 101.2 feet. Now, the only structures that would be in there would be the infiltration basin, and we may need a variance for that. Charlie?
Just the requirement is that the outdoor storage is in the rear yard. Right. So whether it's in the front setback or not, it's not in the rear yard. So you do need relief for the location of that storage area.
Okay, very good. Thank you for correcting me.
Robert, we've also got some other structures in the front yard area for which we're asking for variances, right? We've got a meter display, we've got 2 signs, and we've got a hot box, correct?
Yes.
Could you describe the locations of those for the board?
Right, starting on the north side by the northerly entrance driveway, we will be providing a landscaped sign area. This kind of backward C-shaped is the sign itself plotted. We're setting it back about 6 feet from the property line. And that's within the front yard area.
Before you leave that sign,
Yeah.
there was also a comment in, I think, Mr. Cunliffe's letter about that the sign being located within site triangles. Could you talk a little bit about that?
This sign itself is out, this line here, if you can see that, is the site triangle. The site triangle is dedicated based on a triangular shape from the right-of-way line. I always talk about these site triangles as kind of dating back into the past, where we used to have uncontrolled intersections out in the farm roads, and you wanted to have sight distance for cars approaching so they could see if someone else was coming the other way. It's a safety feature. It's set for driveways. The NJDOT and AASHTO standard for a driveway like this is actually 18 feet back from the, it's in this area, 18 feet back from where a car would stop to check the traffic before pulling out in either direction. As you can see, this area is unoccupied. If the road was to be widened in the future, then the drive would be reconfigured, and then this might come into play as a safety feature. The NJDOT, which one is it? Site distance. This is the from the NJDOT manual. Basically shows that the line
we haven't
is 18.
introduced that as an exhibit. So, Counselor, can we call this A19?
Sure, this is a standard though that is published.
Right, but was it submitted to the board 48 hours in advance of the hearing?
It was not, Jennifer.
Then, sorry.
But Bob, just please describe it with your testimony.
Sure. So basically, it sets the driver's eye at 18 feet back, 10 feet from the edge of pavement to the car or vehicle, and then 8 feet to the driver, which is in this area here. The sign will not obstruct the bottom line is the sign will not obstruct any type of sight. This is a stop sign right here. It's a stop controlled intersection. It's not a free.
Just to clarify really simply for the board. So the applicant under the prior approvals, they dedicated site triangles. The sign's not within the site triangles that were previously dedicated, correct?
This sign is not, no.
And the other sign, how about that one?
And the other sign is not as well.
Okay, so the only thing is just some plantings in front of the sign. And
These
can we
are lower plantings, yes.
Yeah, less than 30 inches in height. We can agree to that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I think before we leave the signs, I just want to say there's 3 different sections of the ordinance that those signs need relief. Number 1, it needs to be set back 10 feet from the property line or 20 feet from the right of way. And I think you said it was about 6 feet back.
It's 6 feet, yes.
So the location needs relief. The size of the sign needs relief. Dimensionally, the signs are not compliant with the ordinance. And then lastly, you're not a corner, so technically you're allowed to have 1 sign and you're requesting 2. So all that being said, I don't take exception to the relief that's being asked for, but I just want on the record that those 3 categories and their waivers, they're not variances because they're in the design section in 256.
Yes, this is the architectural rendering of the sign.
It's not necessary. I'm just putting it on the record that those are the 3 things that are needed and that I don't take an exception. As long as Charlie is okay with the safety of the driveways, I think we can move off the signage.
Okay.
Thank you. Robert, before you leave the front of the site, could you show the board the location of the meter display and then maybe show them what it is and the hot box, because that's technically, we're requesting relief for those 2 as well.
Yes. So on the southerly driveway at the sign that we're proposing, the wall sign, this square here is representation of the hot box location. The hot box is an above ground vault for the valving entering into the site. We're gonna have a new water connection and some new piping to connect to the existing piping. It's pretty well standard now in the industry that the water companies want it above ground. It's easier for them, and so we wanted to actually have a representation of what this would look like if you provided a nice sign around it. You would hide the hot box basically behind the sign, and it does a little aesthetic improvement instead of just having it out. You need to have it out by the front of the right of way and not into the site. It's where the water line enters the site. So we thought it would be nice to put a nice sign around it and have the hot box in that area. So this structure requires a variance in the front yard as well. The other structure is it's really a meter. We're basically just going to lay it out there, I believe. And Pat, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, it's a valve. It's an old valve that was in our system, I believe, up by Monmouth Park.
And this is A15. It's
Yeah.
basically a decorative feature that says, hey, we're a water company, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a 36-inch valve. It's humongous, as they say.
Yeah, 1932 it was manufactured.
So Bob, if you could talk a little bit about landscaping. We have some relief that we're asking for there too, in terms of we don't strictly comply with the required buffering.
All right, I've lost my Zoom here.
Mr. Chair, and if I could just chime in on that, and not to beat it to death, but we went over the same with the hot box in the front yard area with the application on Fairfield Road, and it's dictated by the water company. So I take no exception to the granting that relief, especially since it's screened by the proposed sign. With the valve display, my only concern is it's in a site triangle easement. So if the board is to rule favorable on the application, doesn't take issue, I would just ask that it could be relocated somewhere else so it's not in the site triangle easement. Based on the picture, you know, it's a pretty sizable water valve. We don't want an obstruction impeding someone's sight line coming to and from the site. Will the applicant have an issue with that, Mr. O'Brien?
Pat?
Unmute myself now.
Okay,
No
thank
issue.
you.
So
Thanks, Mr. Cunliffe.
I would just ask for ease of the resolution that you coordinate the location with Charlie's office and make sure that he's satisfied that the driveway will operate safely.
That makes perfect sense.
Okay. I guess one of the other issues is the parking on the site. Is that good, Neil? I go into that?
You can, and we still have to talk about the buffering just a little, whichever you prefer to do first.
Let's go through the buffer, and then I skipped over that. Again, the site, it was an existing site and had existing buffers. Along the front, you have a farm and residential buffer of 50 feet. That's going to be maintained, except for where we have the signs, and that's why we're asking for the variance or waiver. It will be supplemented. The highlighted trees and the larger trees that you see on this are all new plantings. This area was in front of the residence, which was just basically a lawn and a few specimen trees. All this has been done by our landscape architect, Bryce Bennett, who I believe is available tonight if anybody has questions as far as what landscaping will go into the site. I believe he sat down with the township planter, landscape architect, and has gone through.
Sherry, she's here
Yeah.
on the call,
Yeah.
our certified tree expert.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sherry, do you have any objections to what's being proposed, or is everything look pretty good to you?
I mean, I'll let him finish with his testimony, but I did meet Bryce out there at the end of July to review what was on site and what's existing and a few trees that should go. And, you know, we just looked at what we could add to the existing trees out there. The only thing that you might want to discuss is at the southern portion with, you know, since I think you have about a farm, is that correct?
Yes, it's a farm, which is some kind of operation there. I'm not sure what it is, but it's hard to tell from the plan exactly what's out there. And I know when you guys were out there, you probably had a better idea of what to do. So, I mean, I'll represent that we're going to do whatever is necessary to get the proper screening in here. I think the representation that's on here is what was discussed. Again, without a full review in the field, it's kind of hard to tell. So we would offer to certainly meet out there when a time comes to go over and to get it approved and get everything set and make sure we have the right species and everybody's happy with it. But basically, we have a 50-foot farm buffer along the entire farm and residential buffer along the entire southerly border provided in accordance with the ordinance, and it will be planted accordingly. There's also a fence that will be along the property line. That's just a security fence. It will be a screening fence along the material storage area. You can barely see it, but it kind of runs along the property line and it cuts back, and there's an existing chain link fence, safety fence around the detention basin that will tie into that. And it will continue across the front, and it will continue basically to where there's a security fence that crosses the driveway in this area. And that continues through the site and crosses through there.
But in our application, Bob, and in our response letters, we indicated that we might not quite fully meet the intent of that 50-foot buffer, but your testimony is that we will supplement it and enhance it to the best of our ability, but we may come up just shy of the ordinance requirements. So we are asking for relief, correct?
If required, yes. And again, I think.
Well, I mean, we need to know. It can't just be if required. I mean, you know, I know you haven't spent a tremendous amount of time in Howell, but the farm buffer relief is something that this board in particular takes extremely seriously. So like, we're going to need to know before the board is going to act on the application. This is not something that we're going to defer to afterwards to work out in the field. You're going to have to make a commitment to comply. And then that's going to be, it is what it is.
We will comply.
Is there any grading from that bioretention basin that goes into the buffer? Because we don't allow that. Nothing.
No, there's none.
Okay.
I can bring up that plan. Would you like me to bring that plan up?
I mean, I'm looking at it. I just like literally like the grading is like on the 50-foot line and it just kind of stops there. It just looks super tight.
Well, okay. But it's not into the, it's not.
I mean, yeah.
Again, this basin is only a 1.5 feet deep. I mean, it's not a large basin, just a narrow.
I understand. I'm just saying that we don't allow any grading from any drainage in the buffer at all. That's not permitted.
Okay, well, like my testimony is that we don't have any.
Okay.
I can bring that plan up if you'd like to see it.
Mr. Chair, if I could just jump in and just make a suggestion too. So the infiltration basin that's along the east side of the material storage area, there's a number of plantings on the side slopes. My recommendation would be the board is move those plantings elsewhere, probably along the southerly property line, just to not impact the functioning of the infiltration basin during the fall season with leaves and everything falling down. Bob, is that something that can be accommodated? And then also possibly address the board's concern along the south there?
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Where are you, Charlie, where are you referring to?
So east of the material storage area, there's a sand bottom infiltration basin, and the slopes of that, which are 3-to-1, have some shade tree plantings and I believe some other like shrubs and evergreen plantings. So those plantings, they're not in the 50-foot farm buffer along the frontage, it's just around the basin. Could those be relocated, you know, to the farm buffer along the south?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah. And like I said, I normally leave that all to you, Shari, just from a stormwater perspective. I don't want it to cause issues for their basin, so.
All right, so it's the road of large deciduous trees here?
Yeah, and I think he might have a couple evergreens or some shrubs or something like that.
On that side?
Yeah, everything else in the 50-foot, I have no objection to at all.
Okay.
Okay. Again, with the buffer, we're not affecting the other areas of the site towards the rear. I've shown residential buffers. I frankly wasn't sure whether to wrap that area around in here or just maintain it the way I had it shown. So, but in this area, there's a 50-foot planted buffer as well. I could certainly change that line to reflect that if that's what the.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And there is a drainage easement there, correct? With a pipe
There's
in
a
it?
drainage easement shown right through here. You can see that dashed line. That's the drainage easement, which is the outlet piping from the basin that goes through.
So that would technically require relief, because again, we don't allow that in the buffer, but I don't really take any exception. It's below grade. There's landscaping on, like there's grass or whatever on top of it, and they're not really proposing anything. And it's existing, correct?
It's existing, correct.
Yeah. And it's just a residential buffer. It's not a farm buffer, before you guys freak out.
Yes, it is. I will change that to show that line on compliance. And along the northerly property line, again, there's the pallet recycling in that area doesn't require a buffer. And I think that sums up the buffer.
So the frontage, I just want to go a little bit because our ordinance, unlike many others, requires the buffer even if it's across the street and it's residential use or zone. So there's a house across the street currently, and then that ML8 zoning actually has approval for 72 single family homes in that area. So technically your frontage would require a 50-foot buffer as well. And there's, you know, the basin, and then I think the signage and the other items that you had discussed earlier that were in the front yard area would be in that 50-foot section.
Yes, it will be. I would point out that in those areas, there's a little bit more substantial width. We do have a septic disposal fields, but there's a lot of planning that exists in that 100 feet to the parking area as well. And similarly, I mean, the reason we put more landscaping in this rear area by the infiltration basin was to beef up that buffer in itself. I know the code is 50 feet, and I think we have substantial planning through the 50-foot area. But we also, that was, I think, kind of our reasoning of adding some additional planning along that basin. But yes, we meet the code requirements. We feel that it's more than substantial what we're planning in there, and I think we have an adequate buffer around the entire site as required.
Well, I don't disagree that you have adequate plantings, et cetera, but I do take exception. You don't meet the code requirements. So you do need relief from that buffer.
Yeah.
Like I said, the only thing that we allow in that buffer is the driveway. So all the other structures and everything else would require relief because it's within that 50-foot section. I don't take exception to the relief being requested, but I just want to make sure that the record is clear that it is required.
And we did request it. We did request it. So if there's nothing further with the buffering, Bob, if you could move on to just tell the board what we're requesting in terms of parking. We went through the employee counts already, but if there's any more testimony required, we'd certainly be happy to give it also.
Okay, the engineer, his calculation is 173 spaces are required. And that was based on a combination, I guess, of areas and number of employees that may be there. We have 159 marked parking spaces on the site at present. So you were deficient basically by 13 spaces from the engineer's letter. This operation is basically a private utility. There's not a public input in here. Let me just go through this circulation on the site quickly. Delivery and most entrance to the rear of the property, the vehicles coming in will come in through the northerly driveway, proceed through a two-way aisle. This aisle services the parking around the building. The building has entrances in the rear and the front, so there's access to the building. As you come to this point here in the center of the property heading west, you'll encounter a gate. The gate would be card controlled or vehicle controlled, signalized. We've also met with the fire department, and there would be a Knox box, and it would meet the fire requirements. The fire chief has approved this site as laid out. We are asking for a variance on this variance or a waiver on this 20-foot width of the drive here. We did this drive to ensure that no delivery people, whoever came into the back, would want to go back that way. So we necked it down to discourage any kind of appearance of a two-way. The 20-foot is adequate for all emergency vehicles. It's adequate for our operations, and there'll be an electric gate here that operates. So it's a one-way aisle around the rear of the site. So you would enter from the northerly and you go around. If you were pulling into the garage, you pull into the garage. If you were parking for operations for a second to go inside and check on your next job or something, you maybe pull in here. Again, this is not for the public. This is for the employees of the water company. You drive basically around the back of the site. There's another small loading area to this building, so there may be some material deliveries there of meters and the like. This area would act as a back in, or just there's another man door here. So you then proceed out, and there's another gate here, and that would be electronic or card operated, and you would exit the site through this manner. Any employees, any other possible deliveries could use both driveways to the office building. Deliveries to the rear would come in the north and go around the one site. Deliveries to the material storage area would come through the north and come into this area here. We tried to provide as much area in here for maneuvering of any trucks, any delivery trucks. Again, it's not a public parking area, it's a private parking area, so there should be really no conflict. There's a fire lane, will be marked. It's marked presently and will be remarked in the areas we disturbed completely around the site. One other thing is we're going to replace some of the driveway pavement along Yellowbrook Road at this southerly driveway. The way it was built, the trucks actually bottom out. I mean, it's a very steep entrance, and we're just going to grade that back a little bit and get it to where it's more usable and more easily managed. No change in the geometry out there, just be a straight cut meeting the edge of the road.
In terms of, you said we had 159 paved spaces. We've got 12 banked spaces, provision for 12 future spaces on site too, correct?
Yes. So the marked spaces are shown, and just let me call the board's attention to the rear of the site here. There's basically 3 or 4 spaces marked in this area here, but there was a material storage concrete pad here that's flush and graded flat and goes to the pavement. And I just boxed in some parking areas. If we required more parking, say, when we talk about the use of the building, we want to construct a meeting area, basically a training room down in the basement of the administrative offices here, and may seat up to 80 people. Most of those people will come, obviously, the employees that are here already. There may be a few more that visit the site, but this whole area in this rear of the site can serve as, for that time being, could serve as overflow parking. And it would just be for the employees. It's not a public parking area again. You'd have to go through security to get back here. And I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, almost 20, 22, 23 spots back there that could be stacked if need be for a morning session. The employees could park in this area. This also would be a room within a material storage area for employees to park as well. So we feel that in the operation of the site day to day, there's plenty of parking available for the offices. We don't feel that we'd be at 100% capacity all the time every day. There's people that go to other offices, there's people that are transient. The employees themselves will take their own vehicles out, or will take the vehicles out of the vehicle storage building and go out of the site. So we feel that we have plenty of parking on the site. There's plenty of overflow parking if the need be, and it's all controlled by the water company. Again, it's not a public parking, it's not a shopping center, and they're not going to have people parking out on the street or anything like that. So
Yeah,
the
but
site capacity is there.
I gotta take exception to that. You've got a tenant that's going to be in that building, so technically it is partially public. You know, the tenant's not going to be a direct employee to the water company, so you know you are going to have the mix there. That's why you're here for a variance. So, you know, to say this is not a public, which it is now.
Okay, I agree. I mean, it's going to be there'll be non-water company personnel there, yes.
Right.
But again, that KSI, our engineer, they're structural and mechanical engineers, mechanical electrical. So it's actually very similar to what the water company does.
I understand, but if they leave, you still would be able to fulfill that with another tenant. So, you know, you're getting a variance to have multiple tenants, you know, not only just that. So you don't know in the future who might be there. So, you know, we've got to watch that.
So, Mr. Chair, my recommendation would be the board, if they're inclined to act favorably on having the multiple tenant, it's got to be a similar compatible office use. It can't be medical offices or something like that, which would have a more intense parking demand. And any change of tenant use obviously has to go through the zoning, department anyway. So if there is, that's something that would come up, it would get flagged by I assume, Mr. Howard's office. And then just to give the board perspective, so I did my calculation. Anytime that there's uses that are not, fit blank into the schedule, of what's prescribed in our ordinance, we try to base it off of the number of employees, based off of the testimony provided or operational characteristic provided, by the applicant's submittals. So my 173, it's heavily contingent on the applicant's operational testimony. I think in their submittals, they indicated, it's a maximum of, Mr. Quinn, can you clarify, what was that, 162 or something like that? Was that accurate?
In 2019, we represented we'd have a maximum of 182 to 190, but not obviously all in one shift.
Okay. Yeah, so 180, 290, some of them aren't always on the site at the whole time. Some of them come in shifts. So there's, it's 173 per my calculation is just based off of the number of employees. And then I think, Mr. Romano, you didn't include in that 169 you said, you didn't, or sorry, 159, you didn't include the 11 or 12 bank parking spaces, correct? So that's another 160, 170, where I called out 173. So we're talking about 3 parking spaces.
Right, and that's without stacking the parking. I showed it stacked just as an example, but you could park along that side there and pick up.
And as you said, that stacked parking area is in the rear where it's gate restricted, where it would only be employees of American Water. It's not going to be office employees for KSI or visitors going to use that stacked parking, correct?
Correct.
And then just to clarify for the board, with the building that's there now, it's 2 stories of office, but it also has a basement area that's being proposed to be reconfigured as a conference room. I just want to make sure it's clear for the board that conference room, Mr. Quinn, O'Brien, is being utilized just by the employees and the uses on the site, right? There's no seminars where offsite employees are coming to it, or, the KSI is not having, massive meetings other than, small client type of meetings or things are utilizing that space. Is that accurate?
No, it will be restricted to only New Jersey American Water employees, and the vast majority of the employees that will attend those events are for training events for people that are already on site.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that's important for the board. It's employees that are already coming to the site to park on the site. It's not additional to what's already on the site. So really, Mr. Chair, with what's being proposed, 173 versus 170 provided, we're talking about 3 parking spaces. That's like, less than 2%, less than 1.5%, something like that. I really don't take exception to it.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Say has had his hand up for a while.
Yes. I don't see anybody except the 4 people right here.
Yeah.
Mr. Sayed,
Yes.
you got to chime in, sir.
So Charlie, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Fellow board members. This application is starting to get a little bit murky for me in that, okay, so we have New Jersey American Water, who is the site proponent, sort of the host of the facility, and then we have another tenant. And that tenant can be anywhere between a small, medium to large tenant, depending on who they accept to be shared use. So 2 things come into mind. One is, of course, the parking. If you get a larger tenant and you have training events at the same time, and even as Mr. Romano refers to, if you're around 210, 220, maybe you don't have enough parking. Maybe you are stacking up. The other thing that I need clarification on is, so if I have a tenant and New Jersey American is controlling the access to and from, are they issuing badges? What is the means of security to ensure that the public just can't drive in and so forth? So what happens with the tenant? Does the tenant have the same ID as a New Jersey American Water? Okay, Jen, I see you got your hands on your face. So, talk to me.
No. You're like basically like my words are coming out of your mouth. That's what I'm saying. Like, I was like, oh, I'm so happy because I understand what you're saying, because that, like, you know, I agree. I think things have been pretty clean up till now, but now it's starting to get a little, like, with the access and the parking, it's starting to get a little confusing. And then, like, the other question that I would have, which I'm sure you were going to get to, was, you know, what milestone do we hit that triggers that banked parking to be kind of implemented? Is there some kind of milestone that we need to hit in order for that to come into play and that kind of thing? So that's kind of where I was going with it. I was listening to what you were saying, and I was like, yep, I have some questions.
The point is, we don't want to permit this site at some time in the future to turn into a monstrosity.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
Well, especially considering on this roadway, there's really no place like to park overflow. Like, there's no, you know, obviously there's no street parking here. And then where if there weren't available parking spaces, where would the cars go?
So, yeah, and so what really got me was that that training down in the basement, and then full occupancy of 181, training down in the basement. You start running the numbers, you start looking at it, this site can't handle that. That's all I got, Mr. Chairman.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Saya. Does any of the other board members have any questions at this point? I can't see anybody, so you have.
No, I don't. Mr. Saya asked my questions.
Okay.
I'll echo that too. I agree with Mr. Mertens and Mr. Saya. That was my only concerns too. As soon as I heard about the, training in the basement, but I think Charlie just cleared some of that up by saying it was going to be people in the building, but that was also in my mind as well.
And Mr. Chair, just to clarify that, so when I was looking at my parking calculation, I'm just looking at the gross floor area of office space and calculating based off of 1 per 300. So, you know, just based off the numbers, that's what the requirement is. But obviously, it's up to you in consideration of the use. Consider the summation of the application and whether you're convinced the operation that's being proposed can be handled by the site improvements. You know, obviously, there's fire lanes proposed throughout the main site driveway, so that certainly can restrict people from parking along the drive aisles. We have had applicants agree to Title 39 restriction on the property. That could assist the board in that concern. You know, as far as the parking, you know, I think it would be very simple for the applicant to agree to strike that as banked parking straight up from now and just include it on the site plan application and not make it a question. That might also ease some of the concerns. And then the big question mark is just that conference room space on the bottom. Is obviously they've said it's restricted to New Jersey American Water. It's just a matter of how are they going to dictate and ensure that it's just employees that are already on the site is like the big question mark for that. You know what I mean? And it's not like massive seminar for just the employees on site plus 50 additional employees. I think that needs to be clarified and maybe vetted a little bit better by Mr. O'Brien and the applicant.
Okay. Mr. O'Brien.
Yeah, let's have Mr. Westhoven talk about that precise issue,
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman.
Let me, I want to interject real quick. I would like for the board to take a 10-minute break here, if you don't mind. Before we get into that, and then we'll move forward.
Okay.
Okay. Eileen, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Okay.
Let him know when he comes back.
The meeting will reconvene at 8:34 p.m.
Thank you. Hey, Eileen, if you want to call the meeting back.
The meeting will now reconvene.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to ask Mr. Westhoven to talk a little bit more about the meeting room and KSI's use of the parking spaces. Pat, do we still have you?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you're still sworn.
Yes. So to kind of clarify what we're doing on this site is that what we are calling the training room downstairs, the meeting room, that's really going to be used for when we have our training for our guys and everybody in-house for safety, like first aid, CPR, items like that. It's also for if we have a big announcement to gather everybody in this service area, which is basically everybody that's in this building and outbuildings, to have everybody meet down there and have that announcement. So each of our service areas have a training room or a large room that everybody can meet in, and this is what we're going to use the training room downstairs for. Now, for parking and security, KSI will have badges that they'll be able to get into their doors only. They will not have access to the basement, to any place New Jersey American has offices or is utilizing. All New Jersey American employees will have access to the gates. So if we need additional parking, New Jersey American employees can move back into that area and park. One way we can maybe hopefully resolve this for KSI is maybe we can have assigned parking for KSI. You know, pick 25 spaces and put KSI's name on it, say KSI parking only. That way, if we have a full New Jersey American employees here, they'll realize they can't park there and we'll have to move to the parking in the back.
And so to hold exterior, if you will, events down in this meeting room would be just a security nightmare for you.
Yes.
So it's not going to happen.
No.
Charlie?
So my only just common question is obviously like the any resolution approval is going to have distinct language and just making sure that it's obviously only for employees that are already on the site, utilizing the site. And I would just ask Mr. Westhoven, like, there's no intent of the water company. It, you know, in the age of COVID now, there's like more so you have almost like campus office setups where you might have a bank of like tables that have like internet ports and or like power ports and stuff like that. So you're not going to be able to utilize this space as additional office space for overflow, you know, for almost remote employees who might come to this site, you know, once a week or something like that, right?
No, that's correct.
All right. That's really all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Mr. O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have our planner here who would like to talk about the variances and other relief that we're requesting. Cliff, you've already been sworn. Would you give the board the benefit of your qualifications?
Sure. I'm both a licensed planner and a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey. I've been qualified in front of this board, actually for this application previously, as well as numerous other boards in the state. I'm a planner by examination, which if anybody's familiar with the old regs related to engineering, you used to be able to get a planning license without a whole lot of requirements involved. I tested for this and I'm a planner by examination. My background in school was actually a civil engineering degree with a minor in urban and regional planning.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that Mr. Quay's qualifications be recognized for planning testimony with respect to our variances.
Yes, sir. We accept your credentials, sir.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Chairman. So, Cliff, what have you looked at tonight, and what are your conclusions with respect, and before tonight, obviously, and what are your conclusions with respect to the relief that's being requested?
Well, there's certainly been plenty of testimony provided on the various things that are being requested. I guess we'd start with the overall use component itself, which is a sort of a reaffirmation of what was approved previously on this site. I think for the reasons stated, you know, the combined uses between New Jersey American Water and KSI, work fine. We're looking at our parking requirements based off of the square footage of the building. We've had some testimony about the use of that basement area, which really is almost redundant to the the uses in the rest of the building, but for it being a gathering space for the New Jersey American employees for just a collective group event. So I don't feel that the granting of that variance, allowing the two uses on site, is going to be detrimental. I think, frankly, they work complementary to each other. It's office space, and with the amount of parking that's here, it should function fine. As far as the, some of the bulk variances that were discussed, I think we've eliminated the farm buffer variance by agreeing to comply with that component as part of what the final site plans reflect. To the extent that we intrude into the residential variance along the front of the site, we've got the signage, the hot box, and the display of the valve out front. We're going to work with the board engineer to relocate the valve display, which I actually think will be a pretty interesting feature along the front of the site for utility to company to have an old, valve like that out front. Sort of, it's almost like putting a piece of artwork on the front of the site, to be honest. But as long as we get that located back, I think that there are, plenty of planting and buffering proposed along the front. The storage yard, which is, not allowed to be located. It's supposed to be located in the rear yard. Actually occurs in what would be the side yard of the property, but it's set back 100 feet from the road. And once again, a fairly substantial planting and buffering, both, existing vegetation and proposed vegetation going in, that can exist out there without creating any substantial detriment to the environment, particularly, to the use across the street. So I think collectively, and there was a couple of things that we had talked about that we weren't certain whether they were identified as variances or design waiver relief. But once again, I think that with all the testimony previously provided, the relief can be granted, without substantial detriment to the public good or, impingement of zone plan and zoning ordinance. The site is being used for a use that's contemplated and permitted in the zone. So I don't want to belabor the point, but in my professional opinion, I think the relief that's been requested can be granted for the reasons previously stated.
In terms of the bulk variances, do the bulk variances grant the bulk variances further any purposes of zoning?
They do. Well, the signage in particular, the setback along the front is clear of the site triangles by allowing it to be slightly close to the road, which has a fairly substantial distance between the curb line and the right of way. It allows you to be able to view that signage with maybe, not impacting as much vegetation along the front, to be able to create a little bit of a sight line to that. In addition, the wing walls, are sort of an aesthetic feature, and they serve to hide the hot box, which is a required mechanical appurtenance that has to go out there. So yeah, I think they're promoting a desirable visual environment as part of what's being done. So Neil, does that answer your question?
Yeah, how about in terms of assisting this important public utility operations center? Any purposes of zoning that would be served in particular from that?
I mean, this is a service center for public utilities, which are obviously a necessary and important component of the well-being of the public in the community. I think it could, would not be a reach to consider this to be an inherently beneficial use on the property. And, once again, I think that, the operation as it's being contemplated has been sensitive to the environment around the site, and that we've addressed, what I think would be the pertinent issues that might be of concern to people that are around the site.
Any questions for Mr. Quay?
Yeah, Jennifer?
So I would, I don't take exception to the testimony provided. I would just add a couple of things that, I think that the application as a whole for the public utility advances purpose A of the municipal land use law. It promotes health, safety, and general welfare. I mean, it's a necessary utility. And that I think that in most instances, and I would ask Mr. O'Brien whether he disagrees or not, that, based upon the Himeji case, like the bulk variance relief is subsumed within the use variance request. I think that there was a lot of testimony regarding mitigation of the bulk relief as well. So I think they went above and beyond what the case law requires in a D variance. And, as testified, that the secondary use of the structural or MEP, whatever, office in the existing building is relatively low intense. And I think that Charlie laid it out pretty well that, if there would be a change in that use, it would have to be it doesn't have to be exactly like for like, but it would have to be similar like for like with respect to the intensity and the parking demand as was testified here this evening. So all that being said, I think that, you know, the benefits obviously of having a fully functioning and efficient public utility, you know, outweighs the negligible, if any, detriments associated with the application. And I also do want to add, and I'm sure you guys I know are intimately familiar with Yellow Brick Road, but you know, it's not, you know, a winding residential road. There's pretty heavy industrial uses as you get farther to the north. I don't think that there's going to be a negative impact associated with the zone plan and zoning ordinance with respect to the relief that's been requested. So all that being said, unless Mr. O'Brien disagrees with what I've said, I would take no exception to the request that the applicant has put forth before the board this evening.
And I take none. Thank you so much.
Any questions of the board members?
Mr. Chairman, going forward with the parking spots, we're going to have in the resolution having 25 parking spots set aside for KSI or any future occupants. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, I'm good. That's all I have.
Anybody else? Any other board members? Any questions? Okay, Mr. O'Brien.
That's what we have for you in direct testimony, Mr. Chairman. It's a site that's already almost fully developed, and if you will, the applicant's putting some finishing touches on it to tailor the property for the applicant's use. And we got into a lot of detail, but I think in terms of the site plan, this is fairly limited in terms of the development that's being proposed, and we would ask that you approve our application.
Hey, at this time, Charlie, do you have any further?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to make a couple comments. I just want to summarize some things, hopefully real briefly, on what was submitted as part of the application and indicated as addressed. And Mr. O'Brien, you can correct me if I'm wrong with any of this stuff. So the material storage area, I think they indicated there's no debris from the sites as far as like broken pipe and things like that. They are allowed to bring back if they have remnant pipe from a job that's left over to store in the yard and things like that. There's no issues with that. But as far as like construction debris that should be disposed of at a designated center, that's not coming back to the site. They indicated that. The material storage area is going to be lit. They do have provisions on the plan for house side shields along the southerly property line and where it abuts residential uses. I had a comment just about adding some additional details regarding retrofitting of existing site lights. I just asked that be a condition of the approval. I will note that they do have a note on the plan for the lights for the material storage area. It is to be dimmed to 50% after 8 p.m. So it's not going to be lit up like, Yankee Stadium all hours of the night. And it may come back on sometime. I think in their prior testimony for the use in 2019, they said the emergency operations overnight approximately twice a month. So it's not every single night that those lights may be coming on. It's just an emergency purpose situations. As far as the stormwater management, I had a couple comments that I worked out most of the details with Mr. Romano in advance of the hearing. I just asked that to be formally submitted as resolution compliance, and if there's any changes that need to be made, they be addressed with the compliance submission. And I just want to note for the board's record, everything to the back of the site, there's no net change in impervious. It's going into an existing basin. There's no change there. It flows there now. It's got a basin that was designed back in 90s when this was installed. The stormwater management that's being proposed is just for the material storage area. When they originally came in with their application, they didn't propose anything. I told them they needed to revise it. They addressed all the comments that I had. So what you're seeing is pretty close to almost 99% of what's going to be final for any compliance approval. As far as the building itself, just for a building perspective regarding like use and occupancy, I'll just note for the board's record that they do need, I believe, DEP approvals for their proposed septic system. So that's just going to be a condition of the approval. And, prior to getting any occupancy of the buildings that flow to that, I believe it might be the meter and then the locker room building, if I'm not mistaken, that go to that. And then the last thing that I just want to point out for the board is they are proposing an emergency generator on the site. The one thing that I did catch, it does have an enclosure to muffle the sound, but the muffling indicated that it didn't meet the decibel requirements at 23 feet. That's per our ordinance. Is that something that can be rectified with like a enhanced model or something to make sure it complies? Mr. O'Brien?
I'm the wrong person to answer that question.
Mr. Westhoven shaking his
we-
head affirmative. I think you're muted, Mr.
Muted.
Westhoven.
Yeah, it kicked.
Keep on hitting it. Yes, we will, you know, I'm sure they're out there with their, you know, sound attenuating, you know, enclosures.
Hey, Charlie?
And Pat, where's the generator located?
It's located between the T&D building or the vehicle storage and the meter shop and behind the building. So it's kind of nestled in there in the back.
Between buildings, it's
Yeah.
right bang in the middle of the site, right?
Mhm.
That's pre-existing, correct?
They have a smaller one there, correct?
So Charlie, when they're changing that out, do they need an air permit?
That's a good question. I would leave that up to the building department to make sure that they have all applicable permits prior to getting any CO to operate that, you know, that emergency generator unit.
I'm just thinking the state EPA, you know, with these generators, they're always asking for these air permits, you know?
Yeah, honestly, I haven't done one recently, especially this size, because obviously there's multiple buildings here. I've done generally smaller residential or small commercial. So, you know, I can't 100% say, but I would just say as a condition of approval, they got to get all outside agency permits as may be required and deemed necessary by, you know, the township building and construction department.
Mr. Tropoli, you tracking? Thank you.
And that's all really I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Charlie. Jennifer, you have any further?
Nope, I'm good.
Sherry?
I'm okay too, thank you.
Okay. Okay, at this time, I'm gonna take a motion to open the public for questions and comments.
I'll make a motion to open the public, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Hughes. Who's second?
Moretti.
Seconded by Mr. Moretti. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, Eileen, at this time, we'll open the public for questions and comments of the applicant.
We will now open the meeting to the public. If you're calling in, you can press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself.
Michael Daniels is going to be the first one.
Michael Daniels is the first person.
Okay, Mr. Daniel, if you would unmute, please, and activate your camera. I need to swear you in, and we'll get your address. Raise your right hand, please. Swear the testimony you'll give this evening be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Thank you. And may we have your name, please, and your address?
Michael Daniel, 39 Kiwi Loop.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
I was just wondering, I mean, you guys kind of answered this already. I was like, say everyone came back from COVID and everything's like normal in the world again, and there's like a huge influx of just traffic in that area. Is the road and I guess just the quality of life of the surrounding areas are able to support the influx of people?
Mr. O'Brien?
I think we've offered testimony, and I can have somebody else answer this too, but that the parking in the site is able to accommodate the applicant's full expectation of use of this site. And that's the only reason that the applicant's willing to entertain the extension of this KSI lease. Otherwise, of course, as a public utility, the operation of the utility would be of primary importance. So the answer to the question is yes. Again, I can direct that back to our professionals for Mr. Daniels if he'd like me to.
I think you answered the question correctly. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
You have any other question, Mr. Daniels?
No, I am good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Eileen, is there anybody else?
Mr. David Schultz.
Yes, Mr. David Schultz is coming in the meeting.
Okay, Mr. Schultz, if you would unmute your microphone, please, and activate your video.
How's that work?
Yeah, there you go. Okay, would you raise your right hand, please? Swear the testimony you'll give this evening be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. May we have your name and your address, please?
David Schultz, SCHULZ, 2014 Oakhurst Parkway, Oakhurst, New Jersey. Formerly residing at 149 Yellowbrook Road, Farmingdale. I used to live in the yellow house.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
First of all, I'd like to say that the application actually is minor. As one of the other board members expressed that or maybe it was one of the attorneys, the property is has been nearly fully developed. They're really asking for minimal additions or changes, basically to fit their needs. And with the prior owners, I had a relationship with them with the property, and we had discussed we're going to call it finishing the property off, and they never did that. However, the application does this to suit the needs of New Jersey American Water Company. It's a great site for them. I've seen them occupy the office building, some of the outbuildings. I can see the number of employees they have, the trips in and out, being basically as a tenant of theirs, watching the goings on of the water company. They're really actually kind of sedentary. There's not a lot of action going on with these people. They sub most of the construction work out. They go and change water meters. They flush fire hydrants. They listen to people that are complaining about their bills. They do all that on the telephone or on the computer. I really don't know. There's not a lot of people working over there, even before COVID. And their activities are like actually kind of sedentary. Yes, it's the operations center, but it's the water company. They don't really do a lot. So the business of the structural engineer, KSI, the tenant in the building, they occupy about 1/4 of the office space, in particular, 1/4 of the 1/4 of the upstairs of the office building. And typically they use up, or they occupy 5 to 7 parking spaces. That's typical. If they occupy more than 10 parking spaces, that's a stretch. They're having a party. There's not a lot of people that work up there. The entire building, the way the office space is set up, and I'm very familiar with this building, is I'm going to call it excessive square footage per person. You know, if you look at the ordinances and the regulations and all of that stuff, they base a lot of requirements on the square footage of the building. This building, the office building, where you know, examining this parking issue, it's designed and it has never been occupied to the number of people per square foot. The people have more square foot than, I don't know, I think we would all love working in this place with a lot of room. So like this, the parking lot has never, ever been full. It doesn't matter how big of a party you're having or how big of a seminar is. You know, all of that stuff, it's just not going to happen there. Now, one of the reasons why I took the time and the effort to come into the meeting, make a statement, was because of the southern, and the eastern neighbors. Particularly, they had called me a number of times asking me, well, over the past year or two, what's going on with the water company? What are they doing? What are they doing? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I talk to the people once in a while. But in any case, I still really never knew what their plan was until tonight, to the meeting, when I was able to look at the plans. I wish I was able to do that earlier, but I wasn't. But I was lucky enough to look at the plans, listen to the testimony. I know the property probably better than any of the planners, any of the employees of the water company, any of their attorneys, probably even better than all the neighbors combined. When I lived over there on Yellowbrook, I was very friendly with the neighbors. We talked all the time. The hardest thing about moving from there was not being with my neighbors. Despite all of their life's issues of sickness and stresses from work and just about everything you can imagine, we've always been very friendly, very helpful to each other. And it goes every single which way you can imagine. So a couple of them had approached me and asked me what was going on. I tried to contact some of the people from the water company. I never really got any answers. The neighbors wanted to look at the plan. And I have discussed with the neighbors their potential plans for quite a while. And the neighbors got the notice in the mail, which I'm not really sure if they got it registered or not. Doesn't seem like it, but you know, that's the mailman for you. In any case, they had expressed to me issues that they were concerned about because all they're reading is the notice. They never saw the plan. They're not technologically savvy to go onto the township's website, to the zoning board files and so on and so forth, or even participate in a Zoom meeting. They're just not technologically advanced for that. And I'm a little sketchy on those things too. But they had expressed to me a number of issues, and looking at the plans and listening to the testimony, it is my belief, my honest and strong belief, that the neighbors aren't going to have any problem with the application, are perfectly fine with the use. My personal opinion, knowing the property and actually the water company, because I've seen them operate for a number of years on this site, is a very good fit. I believe this, I'm going to call it this unit of the water company, is a perfect fit for the area, for the site. 149 Yellowbrook Road, I believe that this site is a perfect fit for the water company. I believe the water company is going to be an asset to the community on the road, Yellowbrook Road. And I hope that they're very friendly with the neighbors. Not that they have been, they just haven't put their hand out. I don't know, they're very private. Water company is very private. And it's probably a good thing. It's part of probably their policy because it's a public utility, and the water supply and the information that I'm going to call it backs up the business of the water supply really should be secure. And I think it is, especially at the site. I guess I'm going to try to conclude here. My belief is, and I believe the neighbors in question, the southern and the eastern neighbors of the site, would approve and be pleased with what the site plan contemplates as their effective neighboring.
Sure. I'm going to interrupt you here.
Okay.
I need your testimony, not what you think and feel that the neighbors are going to agree. It's just strictly you. That's it.
Okay.
I can't, it becomes.
You know
here.
what, Mr. Chairman, I understand what you're saying. I'm not an attorney. I'm not representing them. There's something about being the agent of the neighbors. I'm trying to be as forthcoming as I can be without making a commitment. And I don't know how to get the neighbors to be on the Zoom or otherwise.
That's
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I've listened very carefully to Mr. Schultz's basically is very deep affection, if you would, for the water company. And he's laid out all of the issues, I think, that he could possibly lay out, including what he believes is the sentiment of the neighbors. Whether some of the neighbors wish to be on Zoom tonight or not is up to them. But, he himself apparently is in favor of this application, if I could say that. And, and with that, Mr. Chair, I think, perhaps he should be thanked for his time, and we should probably see if anyone else is needed. And again, Dave, that's with the greatest respect to you. I think you've really made your point several times, and I think it's important that you made your points. Not trying to cut you off. I just don't think there's much more that that can be said.
Thank you for your appreciation.
Thank you.
It's a shame that I don't live in the yellow house anymore, but I know that's progress. And, it kind of hurt for a while, but things are doing even better than they were when I was living there for the other people.
Good. Thank you, sir. We appreciate your.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And how am I going to turn myself off here?
Hey, Eileen, is there somebody else in the audience?
If anybody else wants to.
If anybody else would like to comment on the application, if you're calling in, you can press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. There's no members of the public raising their hand at the moment.
Okay. At this time, I'll take a motion to close public portion of this meeting.
Make a motion to close public, Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Hughes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Roscoe. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Okay. Mr. O'Brien, would you like to make a summation here?
I don't think so any further than I already have, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is a well-used site. The modifications are relatively minor, and the water company is just really tailoring it for their specific use. We agree to all of the recommendations made by Mr. Cunliffe and by Ms. Beam.
Also with Ms. Shapiro, I would.
Sorry, Ms. Shapiro, also with respect to the trees.
Just get the landscaping right and we'll all be happy. Okay.
Will do, Mr. Chairman.
Charlie, any further instructions?
Nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Jennifer, any further instructions?
No, sir.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve this application. I think even Mr. Schultz summed it up. I think it's a good fit. I think all the stipulations that our professionals put into the site will suit our needs in the towns, and I will make a motion to approve.
Have a motion by Mr. Mertens. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chair, I would like to second that motion. I think we've got quite a bit on the record tonight, so there's really no need to repeat. And I agree with Mr. Mertens, and I think it's a good fit. So I'd like to second the motion.
Eileen, can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Muted, Paul.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Mr. Gonzalez,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
My vote is yes, and I really appreciate you dealing with the farmland buffer and getting that I would have voted no. And I'm sorry, but I have yet to vote for any applicant to do anything within a farmland buffer. And, you know, I'm a farmer, and it means a lot. It really means a lot that y'all went that extra mile to take anything and everything out of that farmland buffer. I understand that there's a culvert pipe in the back, but that's a residential buffer, not a farmland buffer. So I really appreciate that. My vote is yes. Based on all of the conditions and all the testimony that's been placed on the record, that I'm very sure that Mr. Tropoli got everything down. And if he didn't, I know Charlie and Jennifer did. So I appreciate it and good luck.
Thank you so much.
Sir. Nice seeing you, Mr. Romano. It's been a long time.
Yes, thank you. And
You take care of yourself.
you too.
Okay. Okay. Is there any further business of the board?
I don't think so.
Okay, guys, I appreciate everybody coming in and being here tonight. It's really appreciative. And I am very, very thankful, even with the weather that's going to be turning very soon.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it really is.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
can we have Eileen tell us when the next meeting is?
Yes, Eileen.
The next meeting is November 8th.
November 8th. Paul, I want to thank you for my birthday. You know, I know you took the reins. I know you did a great job. I saw the videos. Thank you very much. And I'm not afraid to miss anymore.
My pleasure.
I know the board's in good hands, so.
Mr. Saya took care of business.
Absolutely, and I'm very thankful that the cases weren't carried. You know, you dealt with them and disposed of them. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, board members, and we shall see you at our next meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor.
Be safe.
And have a good one.
Take care, everyone.
Have a good Halloween, everybody.
Yeah.
Yep.